Are we live?
Just waiting for it to.
I should stop
show
screen
up.
sharing, right?
Yeah, you can stop screen sharing. Yeah. So let me see. Are we live on YouTube? Yeah, it looks like pornography. Can you talk now, John? Just so we can make sure you're.
You can hear me and everything? This working for you?
Yeah, it looks like it's good, man.
Great. All right, well, with all the boring technical stuff out of the way, we can talk about the real important things like hentai and things of that nature. So this will be fun. Welcome everybody. If you didn't notice, this is my first time, and no, that is not innuendo on the topic. I'm excited to be talking about pornography and its effects. I think it's something that's not talked about enough, and I think it will be an issue of both great importance and great humor. So I think it's a good way to start off. To open it up, I'll give my little spiel, and then everybody should go ahead and challenge it, or, if I'm thinking positively, just agree. I think basically, I think pornography has gotten a lot more popular in the last years, and that's obviously true, but it's not just more popular, it's changed forms. It's gone from a Playboy magazine that you hide in the woods behind your house to something that's endlessly novel and an endless supply at the click of a button for kids of almost any age. And I think that's extremely dangerous, and I think that the science shows that it's actually extremely damaging for your brain and might very well be technically addictive. I think it's garbage, and I think any utility that it has is vastly outweighed by the amount of damage it does. I think porn is just overall terrible. So if anybody wants to come out in defense, please, or anyone wants to throw out any of their takes, that's my little 60-second spiel. So let's open it up and get this started.
Can I go first, please?
Please.
Because now that I know what this is actually about, I don't actually have that much to say, so I'll make this quick.
Please.
Now I'm gonna give you two examples. One is me personally, and I only bring this up because, again, it's pertinent to the topic of the discussion, and then I'm going to try to generalize the rest of my ability. So, I'm a 28-year-old virgin. I've suffered from depression most of my adult life. I've suffered from suicidal thoughts most of my adult life. I've realized that I'll probably never be in a relationship, and I'll probably never lose my virginity, because at the moment, both of those are horribly bad ideas. And I've been watching porn for about half of my life. And watching porn is actually one of the few ways that I deal with my. So my first question to you is, are you going to seriously tell me that because you think porn is bad, that I should stop watching, given all of the positive effects it's had on me?
Me.
I can respond to that, and then we can go to Chickpea, just because it was directly posed to me. So again, I don't know you personally, and I would never want to interrogate you about your personal life, but porn usage, or rather pathological internet usage, which is much milder than porn, because porn has the orgasmic natural reward behind it, when internet surfing doesn't, is linked to depression. So I might say you're getting your causality mixed up there. That would be my personal theory, is that the depression might come from being a regular user of porn, along with the other life circumstances that you mentioned, and porn is exacerbating it rather than actually making your life better. I would theorize, again, and you can tell me to shut up and that I'm wrong if you want, but I would theorize that yes, it does provide some momentary release, but on the whole it rewires your brain in a way that actually compounds your depression rather than actually alleviates it. That would be my theory. Again, I don't really.
I'll just get one second point quickly.
Yeah,
that's fine. I mean, Obviously, you're wrong. That's fine, because again, you don't know me.
obviously,
But let's get to the more.
Of course.
Before you do that.
I mean, it's an anecdote, so neither of us are really going to convince the other. So I'm open to hearing.
Well, no, but the more general question is the more pertinent question here.
Can I
and
ask
that
a
is-
question before you go into the second point?
Sure.
Sure.
Why do you believe that he definitely will not lose the virginity?
That's irrelevant.
Yeah.
to the
You don't have to answer
topic.
that. It's an interesting
I
question.
know,
but you don't have to
I
answer
that's
put it as relevant.
So it's not. So the second question, and this is the more pertinent question. I use myself as an example, mostly because I wanted to gauge how serious you are about this. Because please understand, you are not the first person to try to tell people porn is bad. And I'm here to tell you right now, that's not going to make porn go anywhere. But if I were to take myself out of it and look at it from the most objective view I can, there are almost 8 billion people on this planet. So I really, and with more people being born almost on a daily basis. So I'm really having a hard time understanding why, if a few people have decided that they want to watch porn, what is that actually hurting? Given that that doesn't seem to have done anything over the time that porn has existed in the vast and maybe, I agree, overly accessible methods to which it does now. Why does it matter that a couple people want to look, given that doesn't seem to be doing anything for the population?
So that's a great question, and it's very important. It's basically, okay, who cares? And I also appreciate you conceding that it might be a little bit too accepted. So I actually respect that. So my answer would be that it's not a couple people. It's like last time I checked, it's like 70% of young men watch it monthly, and like 87% of young American men watch it weekly. Everybody does it is a real phrase, so it's not that uncommon, and it's being mainstreamed into like mass media softcore pornography at this point anyway. So I would say that it's not as of like, I think it's rather pervasive. And I would say that, well, one of the effects is erectile dysfunction has skyrocketed 1,000% in the last 20 years. I would say mental health has been on the rise recently, and you can attribute that to general technology. But I mean, I would argue that porn has a pretty big part in it. It's been linked to epigenetic changes in your stress. Hypersexual disorder has been linked to epigenetic changes in your CRH gene, which is your stress gene, which is associated with higher suicidality and higher psychiatric risk. It's been associated with like a whole heavenly host of mental health problems. I could go refer to them if you want. But on an individual level, it's been demonstrated to decrease gray matter volume in your prefrontal cortex after a while. So in terms of why it matters, that's why I say those are some of the reasons I would give you. It doesn't seem to be doing really good things for people. And while it has its practical utility, as you mentioned, but I think on the basis, it's not a good thing. But please.
Sorry.
Please.
Well, I have one last question, and I'm not going to say anything else.
Sure.
I mean, I can understand that on a general level, perhaps there are cases where there are negative effects to watching porn. I would be very hesitant to assume that they're as bad as the studies that you propose say they are. And I would also want to know who's conducting these studies.
Sure.
Because you just can't trust people. If people have a motive, they're going to create studies to support their motive. That's just how human beings are. But setting that aside, I think the most interesting question is, what do you propose as a solution? Do you think we should just discourage people from watching porn? Do you think we should force people to stop watching porn? Like, where's your head at as far as the solution goes?
So this is the last question I'm going to answer, just because I don't want to hog the whole conversation. So one, if you want to see all those sources, self-plug and also a little bit of a Travis plug. On the War of Ideas website, I have an article and I source everything. There's like 36. So if you want to look at who did those, you should. Secondly, I'm very divided on my some of my more radical days. I want it banned outright. I don't actually believe that. I think where I basically come down is cultural discouragement, because I think you and I agree it's a little bit too mainstream right now. and we should probably discourage it more in the culture. Like the whole thing, like all sexuality, all sexual behaviors are just as equally healthy, I think is nonsense, and it's not helpful to pretend like they are. And as far as legal things, I'd probably institute a very, very, very strict age limit, 18. And like, Pornhub has like, check this box if you're 18. I don't know how I would do this, but if it were up to me, I would have a very strict age limit and make it a criminal offense if a person under 18 did that. I don't think it's still a sexual encounter, and when they're under 18, they can't give consent, basically. So that's my tentative position at the moment, but that's open to change. So thank you, Aaron. If you want to chime in later, please. Chickpea, you were a little bit vocal earlier, so if you want to chime in here, or Bruce just got in here, who I think might be a friendly face to my position.
I want to know, Aaron, how often do you porn?
Excuse me, you're going to have to speak up a little bit, mate.
How often do you watch porn?
Me personally?
I'm honestly probably in that. He was asking me. What did you say it was? 87% of American men watch it weekly.
87% of young American men.
Yes, I'm in that category. I watch it
weekly
on a very regular basis.
Okay,
bro, you need to get a prostitute. What are you doing? Fuck that shit,
all right, again,
dude.
I feel like this isn't.
Yeah, this chickpea, that's funny, but it isn't relevant. We're not talking about people's personal lives.
Okay.
Do you have any comments on the issue writ large, regardless of Aaron's personal sex life? You have anything to say?
Well, the reason I asked about the virginity thing is the whole some people see it as a more like this is sort of the only thing I can do, so that's why I brought it up. But I didn't mean to be very
Sure. Bruce, you were going to talk earlier. Yeah.
Well, I just got here, so is there something specific?
We're talking about pornography as effects. I came out and said that it's garbage. And Aaron talked about his personal experience and how he felt it helped him grope with his personal mental health issues. We went back and forth a little bit, and now we're here. So what do you think about pornography in general?
I mean, I'm not a fan of it at all. I think it's a bad idea to engage in such a thing on a regular basis. It's not reality for sure. I think most people involved in the industry are largely victims of, abuse or some other scenario. So there's enabling that. But yeah, I mean, I think that people would be well advised to stay away.
All right, very well balanced. What would you say on the legal front? Would you advise any changes? Because that's actually an interesting question. And then we'll move on.
Well, I mean, like practically, it'd be very difficult to enforce.
Sure.
But it depends on what that means, because I could see a situation where the measures that are taken to make such a thing illegal would also affect large portions of freedom of association, free speech, freedom of access to information, all the above.
Yeah.
So the legal action wouldn't necessarily resolve that issue either. So I think that it should definitely be more of a social change, and maybe family based, but like legally, I just don't know how you stop such a thing from occurring without
it's just
ruining what we would consider to be a great form of information sharing.
Yeah, that would be my concern as well. The big problem is that if you can't define pornography, and like the courts have basically just said they can't define it, and the fact that they can't define it leaves that door like very wide open. I agree, but freedom of association is kind of already out the window, to be honest. Doolittle, what do you think about this? And then we'll go to Starwalk.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's a little bit complicated, but I think you probably started with a false premise, saying that it's obviously getting more popular and more accessible. and that like it wasn't around in different forms before. I know you're probably, most of the people here are a lot younger than me, but my parents and all my friends' parents and all my friends' parents all had it and used it. There was no, there hasn't been a social stigma around it for, I don't know, close to 50 to 100 years. Maybe America was founded by Puritans 200 years ago, but it was around in many forms even before things like television and movies. Probably the format that you have it in today is a little bit different, and sure, that's risen, but other formats have fallen. There's all kinds of different ways that people used to get that kind of gratification without going on the internet alone in their own house. They would have other kinds of nightclubs that they would go out to and things like that. Those other forms of entertainment have fallen, and these new ones have cropped up. So I wouldn't say at all that it's a new phenomenon, or that it's growing in popularity, or that let's say kids under 18 are like all of a sudden jerking off and they weren't before. That's absolutely ridiculous to me. We were just, some of us were just chatting around before, like, yeah, remember what we used to have to do when we were frickin' 12 years old in the 80s? We had to frickin' find a Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue to get our jollies or something.
Well, that's the point.
So
that's
no. The point, that's not the point. The point is that it's a false premise that it's growing in popularity. It's just changing. The only thing that's changing is just the format that the content is in. Boys have been beating off for forever, like as far back as since we were bonobos. So that has not changed one bit. There have been short periods of time where society was dominated by like I said, like puritanical religious fundamentalists that would not be so nice to their children and made them sleep with baseball gloves on and stuff like that. But that's just, it's a little weird that someone would think that this is a new issue. I also think there's probably a misattribution of what's the root cause of the functional issues that people have. Like you did mention epigenetics, and there's a correlation between activation of certain stress hormones and genes and pornography use. But really, I think this all boils down to not something that crops up later in life, but really how were you raised when you were a child? Did you live in a stable 2-parent household? Did you get moved around a lot when you were young? Did you have your parents constantly beating each other up and fighting when you were young? And did you have a father around at all? And it's been shown in a lot of other ways that the single parent household, or being raised in a household with a father that's not your natural father in the house, or an adult man that's not your natural father in the house, like regardless of whether there's sexual predation going on, it activates stress hormones in children, and they become more promiscuous as a result of not growing up in a 2-parent household. And so the question to me is, what's the reproductive strategy of your heredity? And there's all kinds of people that have they come from families that have this new reproductive strategy, which is one of promiscuity. And one of the results of that is that kids need a lot more novelty in their sexual partners, and whether it's their imaginary sexual partners that they're beating off to, or real ones that they go back and forth between. That's not a result of pornography, but pornography addiction is a result of the same things that result in the promiscuity behavior.
So
and just for example,
a long time ago.
Sure, Mace, hop in there. I have some
Well,
stuff
like
to
for
say about
example, when I was a kid, when a girl turned into a stripper, it was well known ahead of time that she has daddy issues.
it. Right, sure.
And if a guy freaking can't get a girlfriend and beats off all the time to pornography, that's because he has daddy issues.
Really?
Okay, well, I know 87% of
daddy
American men
issues.
don't have daddy
No.
issues, so it can't be that purely.
But
I'm
it's
sure
a similar thing. What kind of an environment were you raised in, and so what kind of which of your genes have been upregulated and which ones haven't?
Sure.
And
So
I think those are the root causes of the same thing.
Let's have
So
daddy
are
issues.
you telling me the reason I'm single right now is because I have daddy issues?
I don't know
Who
why
wants
you're.
to be my daddy?
Yes, 100%.
I'm just talking. Yeah, I'm just talking. I'm not talking to anyone in particular, but there's trends and there's general things that happen, but everyone has their own particular situation. So I'm not.
Is there any way I can fix these daddy issues?
I don't know.
Just come over and see Dad.
When you don't have access to video at home, and you only had magazines, and most young kids couldn't get them. It's way worse today, and anyone can access it, and it's way more kids use it now because it's in videos, and you just go on Google. You have to get some shitty magazines. It is worse now.
Yeah.
Like I was saying, you go on Google, but I didn't have any problem getting it from as far back as when I was 6. I don't think I know anyone that did that. I don't think I know anyone that was a lack of sexually stimulating material that they could masturbate to if they wanted to.
But do a little, maybe I'd say this. So if you set out one day,
Future?
oh, I'm sorry, go Lebowski. I'm sorry.
I was gonna say, like, even just look at like the Karma Sutra, right?
Yeah,
That was
I think the
2,000
issue
years
is
BC.
Well, I could be wrong, but like
very, very graphic.
you might refute the idea that it's more readily available, I suppose. But like, am I right or wrong when I say that the vivid interaction, I would say, we know that there is stimuli from watching blue LEDs at a young age, and we know that there is stimuli from TV, particularly screens, and then that being used for viewing porn in real time
And
would have a harder
Yeah.
or a more lasting, longer lasting, and maybe more harmful impact versus what you're talking about. That the idea that things have been around forever, that's not, I mean, there's cave drawings, there's people who have imaginations, that's not, but we're talking about today, I would assume, right? It's, so
Yes,
it's not necessarily apples to apples.
Well, that's exactly the point that I wanted to get to go to this point, because we understand we understand what you just said is the case, but we also do understand that just because kids listen to heavy metal in the 80s, that doesn't turn them into Satanists, right? So it's not like all of a sudden somebody starts listening to Metallica in the 1980s and they play Dungeons and Dragons, that they're going to be like turning into these Satan worshiping kids who are going around killing other kids. Like this is the same kind of like social panic that sort of happened back then. This is something that always sort of happens, right? It's like,
Yeah, but the fallout of like the idea that somebody became more aggressive or satanic from records was easily disputed because everyone was listening to it and being exposed to it without, actually any evidence of that. But in this case, there's evidence of the issue. Not to mention the fact that like the industry itself is sort of the rock industry is a mess too, but like, it's not nearly the same scenario.
So I will say just one last point, and then I'll let everybody else take over. To me, it seems like it's not necessarily an argument about pornography right now that we're talking about. It's more an argument about like isolation, and maybe you're right in the fact that we have it so readily available now. Like we can isolate ourselves more than we could previously at other points in history. But I think that's probably the bigger issue here than the actual pornography or like masturbation or anything like that. Like those things have been fundamental for all animals for who knows how long. You know, like dogs fuck other dogs. Like chimps jerk off all the time. Like this is just normal. You know, this is something you see everywhere. But
I don't think that's the.
General
think that's the
masturbation
concern,
and
though.
porn consumption those are not the same thing. Doolittle brought up-
Okay.
I think those are different points.
Okay.
I think. I don't know. I'm just assuming.
Because I read that the article in the War of Ideas is I felt like there was some sort of aspect like that too, whereas like the masturbation in of itself was contributing to the problem because you're just going for like repeated gratitude, right? But then
Yeah, so yes, but it's not the main. Yes, but it's not the main thrust of the article. The general problem is the endless novelty, and this is kind of what I wanted to touch on with Doolittle. So you're right, essentially, that if you wanted to go get a porno mag back whenever you were young, let's say like 1400s, who knows, you could go, if you set out that day to go get it, you could definitely get it. And Doolittle, I'm just kidding, by the way, I love you. If you set out in a day
that's okay.
to go get it, you could, obviously. But the difference, I think about, if you want to use the internet, think about it like the local library versus Wikipedia. Like, sure, you can find the same information if you set out to do it, but now, like, the second you get that itch, immediately it's 3 clicks away. And that's what I'm worried about for the addictive side of things, because it's endlessly novel and it's at your fingertips at all times. After a while, that does become addictive in a way that Playboy magazines might not, because they're not endlessly novel. After there's only so many pages, you can't just keep going. And while I'm sure you could eventually hypersexualize yourself if you tried with magazines, it's much, much, much easier with pornography. And while popularity might not have increased, ease of accessibility certainly has, because I can do it instantly. I don't have to have something saved up or go out and search for one. I can get it whenever I want on a whim. Those are not the same thing. So while I think a lot of your points are true, I think that there absolutely has been a bit of a ground shift in terms of accessibility, just in terms of how easy it is and how fast it is. Doubtsu, you haven't gotten here yet. Well, someone respond and then Doubtsu after whatever.
Let me just say this one thing, because stuff like this really grinds.
Okay.
Because as we've said before, you're not the first, nor will you be the last person to try and target porn. If your premise is that, and I'm talking to you directly because you're the one making the claim, just to be fair.
Fair enough.
If you're claiming that porn addiction is bad, I go, okay, well, so is an addiction to sugar or gambling or alcohol or hardcore drugs. I mean, I heard you say ban, and I went, first of all, I'm not going to live in your authoritarian nightmare.
Well, I said I
and
thought
second of all, this, I understand we're a social species. I get that, and we're vastly interested in each other's lives. I get that. It makes sense. But there just comes a point in time where you've just got to say, mind your goddamn business. If you're going to live in a free country like America, you've got to give people the freedom to make their choices, whether they want it good or whether they want it bad.
Yeah.
If people make bad choices, they should have the freedom to do that. Otherwise, why not just be an authoritarian regime and basically say you only get to do the things that I think are good?
Yeah, so I actually agree with that.
Stop meddling in people's personal lives. Stop.
Okay, I haven't. I've just put out some information and a warning and an argument. So I haven't done anything. I said I've entertained the notion, not that I accepted it. I think it should be banned for people under 18 because they're not adults and they don't have full freedoms. So, and
it already is.
For the record, I agree
not
with
very effectively. It's not. We could be doing a lot more, is my point. But yeah, I guess if you want the freedom to do things that are bad for you and bad for society, I mean, yeah, that's part of your right. I think it kind of defeats I feel like the whole point of freedoms and rights is in order to build a more virtuous and healthy culture. So you could sway me there, but generally I agree with that libertarianish position. So despite your emphatic condemnations, I actually agree with you in terms of the legal stuff generally. Daltsu, you've been here for a while. Get in here. What do you think? I feel like that meme, have you ever seen it? It's like some animated Disney movie where it's like the guy and he's surrounded by a million swords. That's kind of me right now.
Hey, we haven't heard from Chickpea yet.
I'm on your
John.
side, John.
Huh?
We haven't
Well,
heard
Bruce,
Chickpea.
you're my one light in the dark, honestly. Okay, Chickpea then, if Daltsu is MIA, and then we'll go to a best of intentions because I do not recognize this person. So Chickpea and then best of intentions.
Wait, I play Clash of Clans, mate.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Keep playing Clash of Clans.
I was just wanted to say, after this, you could all join me. I'm gonna have a stream party. I'm gonna put some help out.
I feel like you're missing. I feel like you're messing the point of this, Chickpea, a little bit. I feel like.
Right. Everyone's fighting.
All right. Well, everyone unconvinced by my obvious puritanical religious hysterics, go watch hentai with Chickpea after this. Best of intentions, and then Loki, who I'm sure is gonna tear into me in a minute here. Best of intentions, you're up. Going once, going twice, sold, but not to you. So Loki, I think porn is bad. What are your hot takes?
I think that's an arrogant piece of shit, dishonest attitude. Porn's a tool that is used in a whole bunch of different ways by different people. I think that
someone's angry.
That's all right.
Make it bad for them end up being pretty sick people. Yeah, but that's not inherent to porn.
Okay.
We should get everyone who watches porn and just kill them. I've had enough.
No. Okay. So one. Wow, you're really good at this. Stay away from the term dishonest because that implies I know that what I'm saying isn't what I actually believe and I'm saying it anyway, and that's an attack on me, not my argument. If you want to call my argument a piece of shit, that's fine. But the
Actually,
dishonest...
you're wrong about that, John. The way you've been dishonest repeatedly, is when you stipulate something as a factual basis for a subsequent argument, you make it implicit certification that you stated something accurately.
Loki,
and it's dishonest whether you don't know or whether you made a misrepresented certification in that context.
Loki, if you think I'm wrong, say I'm mistaken or misunderstood.
Well, no, he's right. I told you how you were mistaken, and you didn't withdraw the arguments that follow from your from your false premises.
So it's just a matter of the form of dishonesty and misrepresentation and scam. It's not a matter of whether you are or not, just form.
Loki, dishonesty comes from intent.
Dishonesty is when you say something.
Would you say all religious people are inherently dishonest because they believe something that they can't, that their premises are false for by your estimation? Would you say that they're dishonest, or would you say that they're wrong or delusional or whatever? Like you can disagree with me and we can have this argument. I'm happy to put on the fighting gloves, but do not imply that I know I'm lying. I'm saying what I believe to be true, and I'm making arguments based on the premise. If you want to attack my arguments or attack the premises, that's fine, but saying I'm intentionally misrepresenting them is called ad hominem, and I'm not going to stand for it. If I'm misrepresenting, if I'm misrepresenting them, that's fine. You can make that argument, but saying it's dishonest implies intent, and that's wrong.
And repeated patterns of trying to stipulate that things are true without doing the most basic level of due diligence. That's inherently the dishonest pattern.
If that were true, it would be lazy.
He's just disagreeing with you. He's going through that process, but he's disagreeing with how you've gotten to your answer. He's not being dishonest, and your definition of dishonesty is incorrect based on how we manage this server.
Well, I would disagree with you on that then, because he's making stipulations of alleged fact. And when that's misrepresented, whether it's due to reckless indifference or overt malicious intent, they're both dishonest.
Well, it could be out of just sheer ignorance or stupidity, but it doesn't.
Stop using big words. I can't understand what the fuck's going on.
I'm being called dishonest, and we're saying that I might not be dishonest. I might just be stupid or wrong or ignorant.
The question is of intention. There's no intentional dishonesty, intentional deception. It can be misrepresented in some way. Facts are in question, but there's no intentional fraud, in my opinion.
Yeah. So we can. Let's move on from, targeting people. Let's deal with the argument.
Yeah,
Also, if this were so,
go ahead, Bruce.
if this were so clearly defined as common knowledge without debate among academia as well, then this wouldn't be an argument. So there is concern, there is a bit of data on both sides, and there is a serious problem with the industry that people are engaging in. So all of those things considered, there's still an argument to be had. It's not settled like gravity exists or something like that.
And even a flat earther who doesn't believe in gravity isn't necessarily dishonest. They're just crazy. Now, you made some arguments saying that I was so flagrantly indifferent, or you were very, very explicit. So instead of talking,
that's based on a repeated series of similar patterns.
Tell me something specific, and let's have an argument about the material instead of attacking my intentions. It's let's get productive here. So tell me some specific shit, and I'll respond. And I don't want to dominate the conversation.
I've already done that several times, and you joined in to see what was going on while I'm trying to do a few things that I need to get taken care of. So, but maybe some other time on that. Because it's been a repeated pattern, however, not just one-off instance.
Yes, we've had repeated disagreements, and I've responded to you. Then we've had repeated discussions.
Repeated stipulations of facts of things that are opinions, largely rooted in religious bias. Okay. And then arguments that end up being garbage.
You're assuming motive again with the religious thing. But okay.
Guys, we don't want to be doing inside ball right now. We're doing a live show. Let's just keep going with the conversation.
Lebowski, so true. Thank you for keeping me on topic. I love you.
As far as the destructive industries, you have alcohol. Drugs that include spiritual and self-medicinal traditions that are trashed not by the traditions, but by undercutting of social mechanisms or creating criminal risks, or a warped form of Judeo-Christian doctrine to go from teetotaling to addiction to the binary good-evil thinking, and not life balances that other people and paths accomplish successfully. You have gambling industries, and you even have marketing of food and cosmetics, and too much is never enough consumerism that create unhealthy patterns. And in none of those cases is it the thing or the activity itself that's unhealthy. It's the use of according to common patterns, which are pushed as legal, capitalist. Social structure norms, and protected even when they're pushed in abusive ways.
You think there's no self-detriment to because you mentioned food, endless novelty, fast food, stuff like that. Is what I mean.
Well, not just fast food, but I've seen people, because of their religious indoctrination and OCD-ish traits and warped notion of good and evil, addictively use quote-unquote healthy green vegetables to the point of repeated gastric distress.
Sure. Yeah, sure. I agree. So,
it's not that the food is unhealthy, it's the manner of a real grossly out of balance use of it.
In those, and I would agree that even healthy things can be abused. I would 100% agree with that. Now, I disagree that logic applies to pornography, but that I disagree with that. Chickpea, you were about to say something. Get in here.
Oh, it just says that I'm addicted to grapes. Just carry on, mate.
Okay. Anyone else want to throw a bone? Like Lebowski, you've chimed in a couple times, but we haven't actually got your full take. I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, but I'm pretty much right there where it's, I think, like I said earlier, I think maybe more of the issue you have is the behavior surrounding this specific thing as opposed to that thing itself, right? So so any sort of behavior about any sort of object, a person, or some sort of idea, those different behaviors can differentiate between different people. So some people like way more patriotic, or some people might smoke weed a couple times and they're good, but some people just turn into total potheads. Like it just depends on like that person's specific behavior around this sort of object or thing, right? So the one thing that I find interesting is you've probably grown up with pornography being like ready at your fingertips your entire life, right? It's from the time you had a computer.
From the time I had any electronic device, yeah.
Yeah, you had it there right off the bat. You were born with it. So, and I sort of get where you're coming from with that frame of mind, but I do think that's more just a blip in what's going on. I think as time goes by, and we start to understand. We start to be, I guess, more realistic about sexual behaviors within human beings. I think these kind of issues are going to go by the wayside. You know what I mean? Like there won't be as big of an industry around it, but there also won't be stigma around it.
Well,
So it'll level out.
Well, I certainly hope that happens. So I guess we.
Yeah, what he said.
Yeah, of course. Go ahead.
So, understand, I don't 100% disagree with you. I mean, I'm willing to acknowledge that I might have a problem. I can stop whatever I want.
It's wonderful. Keep going.
But I think that there's another point here that's worth mentioning. This might be a hot take. This might be just me talking out of my ass.
It's what we're here
for.
But
fair enough. I think one topic that is worth exploring is how sex in general is very taboo in the greater American culture. And I do think that when you make something such that it's considered uncouth to talk about it in greater circles, that people who are genuinely curious will find measures to seek out that information. I would argue that if sex wasn't such a taboo topic in the greater American culture, you may or may not find that less people turn to porn to begin with. If more people can have honest conversations, if teenagers can ask their parents about sex and actually get answers, proper answers, and don't have to rely on some bullshit health class. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I do think that you may find fewer people resorting to porn to get their education and to get the things that they want to know about sex. But I could be 100% wrong about that. But it's just a theory.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that, first, I disagree very strongly that sex is really socially taboo at this point. I mean, like, a little bit, but I think we've gotten, like, pretty open, let's say, about sex and sexuality in today's culture. But I 100% agree, if our education system, or even better, our family structure, like, had its shit together, kids would know these things, and the curiosity wouldn't get them hooked initially. So I think we largely agree. Anyone else want to chime in? Bruce, maybe even Trav?
I mean, more specifically, like a couple of the recent studies that were over the past 10 years, and I could link them again. Like, there's significant dopamine that's gained from using porn, even more so than sexual activity. And so, like, the repeated use of that then leads to the addictive behavior. And not to say that, like, other addictive behaviors don't have this problem, but if you are going to equate them to sexuality in any way, the fact that porn on its own has a higher dopamine hit than even the sexual acts, it becomes a bit of a problem when it comes
And there's a
to
really
experiencing.
yeah, and there's a
that
really
is the,
yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were done. Keep going.
just becomes an issue when it comes to some intimacy. Not all, of course, but there are concerns in that regard. Also, continued exposure to something that would be otherwise considered beyond the pale will also lead to an acceptance of something that should not be accepted, and that's what I mean. Like, there's a difference between something that is taboo, but when it no longer is taboo because it's accepted, then something else then becomes taboo. And so the issue there is like access to that on a regular basis really starts to shift the goalposts as far as psychology is concerned.
How do you define terms like beyond the pale, or create normative judgments you're implying? When porn, it has a lower addiction rate than narcotics, but most people, in both cases, use both in ways that are either healthy or not harmful.
Yeah, well, I'm not making whataboutisms. I'm talking about the issue at hand. So if
But
you'd like me to defend the idea of heroin, then okay, that's an issue too.
Have fun with that one.
You're overgeneralizing. Even with heroin, diacetylmorphine, there are issues in medicine that haven't been explained yet as to why heroin is effective as a painkiller in people for whom morphine sulfate isn't. There are some quirks of how humans work that are pretty complicated and that we don't understand, but where a lot of public policy or Calvinist religious dogma is obviously flat out wrong. And it takes minority cases and tries to generalize as if they're a norm or universal, which is just not true.
Bruce, that was directed to you. Would you like to respond, or I can?
I didn't have anything to respond to. This is just a difference of opinion on the issue.
Okay.
Oh no, it's a well-documented set of facts, but with
a well-documented set of facts as far as dopamine is concerned. We have a well-documented fact as far as dopamine is concerned. Not to mention continued exposure to abuse that is then accepted in the normative state, meaning abuse of a sexual partner is seen as okay. Not to mention the fact that the people in the industry itself are being perpetuated into the abuse for the sake of the people that are okay with such activity. So if we have a number of laws on the books around abuse, yet for some reason it seems to be thrown away when it comes to voluntary porn, that's not real reality. It becomes a fantasy in real life that doesn't actually play out. Not like, and also I said, like, the people are ruining their otherwise healthy sexual drive for dopamine when they're utilizing the same mechanisms in pornography.
I've seen abuse used in various law and policy documents in ways that are abusive, as in fraud to try to express her religious opinion and justify it in unjustifiable ways. So I question how you're using a term like that.
I think it's pretty clear. I mean, the abuse of an individual, abuse of a substance. I mean, which one do you want to talk about?
The use of the term abuse in that context, is like particularly with regard to BDSM, and
That's not. I mean, so what are you making the case that like people are able to somehow use abusive scenarios in these fantasies at young ages and then divorce them from reality?
That sounds like a loaded question with a bunch of implicit biases. And it also calls for overgeneralizing and making a response without most of the info required to answer a question like that seriously. But yeah, there are some people who use very similar practices in ways that are healthy for them, or that may, mitigate other, problem issues for them that could be done, in ways that would be abusive for others. That doesn't make the superficial aspects, one or the other in either case.
We have scenarios that we can point to of people that have experienced intimacy issues later in their life, a number of problems with their addictive behaviors because of this substance, which I would say is pornography. But I mean, as far as because there are exceptions to rules, or even some people in the world that benefit from such scenarios, doesn't make it necessarily the case or prescriptive for people either. So, I mean, we could also see that in many other avenues of life. There are people that are able to utilize many things that would be harmful for them in large substances. That doesn't exactly make it necessarily advisable or even okay.
Well, how about the use of Christianity as an abuse mechanism? Should we ban all of Christianity?
No,
because it's
okay,
used
that's not.
in millions of cases.
That's okay. I'll let Bruce respond to that one. You're better suited for it anyway.
Well, I mean, if you would like to go down the litany of things that people have done across humanity in some ideology, sure, okay.
Another side of that, by the way, is that I used to have a friend who got killed young by a drunk driver, but she was teaching some of her early teen daughter's friends to masturbate or about porn as ways to satisfy sexual urges as emerging teenagers without obsessively looking for guys to fuck them in relationships that weren't healthy, and where the unhealthy relationship drive is potentially far more of a problem for them than using toys or tools.
But isn't this an argument just for masturbation, not an argument against, not an argument for porn?
No, we're arguing about pornography specifically. It was the
Yeah, that's what I'm
title.
saying. That's an argument for masturbation, not an argument for or against porn.
Which are different, because porn has
but
endless
it's a
novelty.
context. It's a real life context for people, and a comparative life options set of issues where the tools or the toys aren't inherently good or bad, and a lot of people over major life segments are dealing with unhealthy options, and comparatively, in some cases, as long as it's temporary and not done in a way that creates the gross long-term life distortions that have been mentioned, the porn or sex toys, are healthier, in some contexts like that than many alternatives.
Yeah.
Okay, so Loki, I'm going to make the daring move of saying something about that. So the tools actually do matter a little bit, and the reason is because of the novelty. I'm sure you probably know, but just to make the point, like, novelty is what drives humans. It's something called the Coolidge effect, and it's best described by just using the study that happened. So basically, they gave a female rat to mate with, and he mated with her until he got bored and he wasn't interested in having sex anymore. But then they took out the female rat and they put in a new female rat, and lo and behold, he wanted to mate again. And every single time he got bored, they just put in a new one, and he kept going until, one, the ejaculations were mechanical and like biological material wasn't being transferred, and he even went going until basically he got exhausted. So I think that the tools
I've done that. Yeah. I can attest to that.
Okay.
That happened.
Thanks, Doolittle. I appreciate that. Now my argument's ironclad. I appreciate that.
That's ironclad. It totally works. You just need to have, and you can even switch back and forth between the same two. You don't even need a third one.
Yeah, well, the point that I'm making is that the tool novelty matters because it messes. Well, it doesn't mess with your reward circuitry, but your reward circuitry is hardwired to pursue novelty. It's called the Coolidge effect. It's well documented. I'm not just pulling this out of my ass. And porn has that in spades in ways that regular masturbation doesn't have, and even earlier forms of porn didn't have as much as porn does. It's infinite, and it's infinitely novel, and that does things.
Yeah, can I respond to that? I think
Please.
You made your point pretty well, but can I respond to that? So
Please.
if you're an ordinary married person that wants to have a lifelong relationship with the same woman, don't you think pornography could be an interesting and useful tool to accomplish that end without doing things like going around and satisfying your needs in other ways to satisfy your novelty craving?
Well, no, because I think use of pornography is actually damaging to you in a couple ways. So I think you can get your novelty craving.
I mean, as opposed to using like prostitution, or going out and having affairs with people that are extramarital affairs with people that aren't your wife.
Yeah.
Just to satisfy your craving for novelty. Yeah. Or should we doom people to live through their 40s, 50s, and 60s without having sex because they're just not interested anymore?
Well, that's interesting. What I would say is that, one, going around watching porn or going around having affairs with people desensitizes you. So like the constant pursuit of novelty and the achievement of it will further and further desensitize you from wherever you started. So I'm pretty so.
I mean, you just said that the rat gets uninterested pretty quickly, right?
Yeah, but yes.
Yeah.
But so I see your point, obviously, but as opposed to affairs, like I would say yes, if you have to pick between a pornography or cheating on your wife, I would say use porn if you have to. But but while our neurocircuitry is still the same as rats, that doesn't mean we don't have other methods of pursuing novelty. Like you can try different things in the bedroom if you want to get like really graphic here. And again, as opposed to the alternative, which is a practice that has been linked to multiple mental health issues and actually gray matter deterioration. And Loki, if you want to challenge me on that, go right ahead. I don't see it as I don't see it as healthy. I don't see it as a healthy like substitute. And I don't think it's like a good substitute.
Other than the framing and the conclusion, part of what you said I agree with, and I've got an example that might be better than just saying novelty. There's a standard term in poly communities of NRE, or new relationship energy, which reflects a good part of the fairly universal neuropsychology aspect of that. But to extrapolate that necessarily involves cheating or abusive relationships, it ends up being a presumptuous misrepresentation, because it assumes a universal context that simply is not a universal context. It may be common in some, social or political, circles, but there are other alternatives that actively exist among humans, present and past. The new relationship energy model, is something that. I guess, what if you were in a binary closed, geometry terms from poly educators, relationship, and had a strong desire for, the NRE, or what you're called novelty, impetus. Is it better to be using porn for that within the relationship, or to be seeking, secretive partners behind a spouse's back in ways that would be cheating, as opposed to an open relationship that's honest, which is what poly communities are about.
So, I mean, I know very little about poly communities, but I would imagine that jealousy and insecurity are pretty common. And I would also just point to the fact that there's been millions and millions of exclusive matrimonious relationships that have worked out for people and been fulfilling for people. It's been the cultural norm for a very long time.
It's simpler and easier and better supported socially.
Well, Okay, sure, but that doesn't make it any less viable. Is basically my point. And if you're gonna give me the choice between porn or cheating, I'd like, okay, go watch porn if you have to. But usually people can exercise a bit more self-control than that, unless they've already gotten hooked on the porn to the point where they're impulsive, and then sometimes they can't control it.
Or maybe the impulsiveness isn't from the porn. Maybe it's from the way they were raised by their parents, who didn't do a very good job.
I mean, maybe, but I can just dive into the neurochemistry now, like if you want. Aaron, you were gonna say something. I don't really want to be the focus of this, but I can dive into the actual neurochemistry if that's where we're headed.
Well, again, you're the one making the claim, so.
Okay, yeah. I wish someone else would make it, so I wouldn't have to talk so much. But spotlight's on me.
So I think I just thought of a couple other things. So
Sure.
first of all,
Love it.
I think one of the fundamental, I'm not going to call it issues, but I think one of the fundamental phenomenon that occurs, sex tends to be, like a lot of things, romanticized, right? That I do agree that porn can absolutely give you a false impression of what sex is actually like. Now, to be fair, I don't watch that kind of porn because that kind of porn is bullshit. But the thing is, to anybody who would say, "Oh, porn is bad," it's not good for you. One of the things I've had to come to the realization of very recently is that we are fundamentally still cavemen. Modern society isn't good for it. We are not meant to sit on our asses. We're not meant to have so many different forms of stress and threat to our survival in our faces at any one time. We're not meant to eat the kind of food that we eat, and we're not meant, especially in America, to be the kinds of disciples that we are. So, but another aspect of us being cavemen is the fact that reproduction and sexuality is one of the core tenets of all living things. And as far as impulse control goes, I would argue, and I know this is completely counter to your argument, but be that as it may, I think porn as just a general thing that exists is actually a way that people exercise self-control. Because that guy or that woman, that guy or that gal that would be addicted to sex, which is, in my opinion, far more harmful, and can lead to far more dangerous and self-destructive thoughts and behaviors, is now hooked on watching other people do it. Which, I'm sorry, I know you think porn is trash, but I think if we're going to accept the reality that people are going to make choices that are not in the favor of their own health and well-being, porn is like how Sweden has clinics that are specifically designed to give people safe shots of heroin. So I would say that any attempt to alter or change, other than organic, because I've said before, I absolutely believe in organic change. And I do believe that if evolution and the path of society says itself, the general thoughts and opinions on porn will absolutely change at some point. But any attempts to force that in any way by trying to pressure people through cultural shifts to think porn is bad is going to have knock-on effects that even you might not have thought of. So I think that porn should remain exactly as it is. People are going to get addicted to no matter what it is. You can't stop that. That's just how we are human beings. So I'm sorry, but as long as we have impulses that we're clearly trying to control, I mean, you can no longer, in America at least, you can no longer just snatch a woman up off the street and have your way with her without there being consequences, clearly. So if these people don't have avenues to take out all of that, especially men with a lot of testosterone, to take out or to release all of this sexual tension, that we're all going to have a less asexual? No, I'm sorry, but I wholeheartedly disagree. Porn should remain exactly as it is, no matter how trash you think it is. It genuinely does serve a mitigation purpose.
Yeah, and
Aaron,
just
you have a better idea of how to mitigate and how to. Obviously, there are other avenues, right? You can take up hobbies, you can exercise, you can do all these things. We are still sexual creatures. That is how we reproduce. And reproduction is literally one of our core drivers as a species. So unless you've got a better idea, porn should stand exactly as it is.
Doolittle, you want to do a hop in?
Yeah, I was going to do a yes and.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah, so if you think about like economies of scale, right? A certain number of women are going to be captured and or trafficked in order to satisfy, men that need to get their sexual desires satisfied, but they're not in an adequate monogamous relationship, right? And if you just think about like the scale of even if the porn actresses are generally distressed in the reasons why they're doing porn in the first place, the scale on which they can reach a larger audience and satisfy more demand with less damage, it shouldn't be taken for granted. If ever, like, let's say if there was no pornography at all, and every sex act that a man wanted to do had to be taken out on an actual human female, as opposed to an image on a screen.
Well, I think
the total quantities of prostitutes is 100 years ago. The total quantities of prostitutes 100 years ago was exponentially higher. Sure. And if you look back in the 1800s, it was way higher, I would say. Right, the number of women.
I'm in favor of banning porn now. Let's do it.
Right, so. If you want more actual prostitutes, just go to Singapore. If you want more actual prostitutes, just go to Singapore, where there really isn't any porn, but there are actual sex slaves all over the place.
Not going all the way to Singapore.
Yes,
bring them to my area.
Lebowski wants to yes and a yes and. Let's keep it going. It's a yes andception. How many layers?
I would just say yes. What Doctor said is right. Like definitely in the past, even before we had porn, prostitution was way more prevalent. Prostitution is way less prevalent now than it was in the past. I mean, can you contribute that to porn? Can you say that's so porn has actually made contributions in that realm?
Yeah, I mean that's a theory, and it's one I'm actually inclined to agree with. I guess what I would say is that there's not really a binary, because I think it was Aaron very colorfully explained. People have been wanking off before porn existed. So that's an interesting social argument, and it might play into the assertion that porn should be like banned outright. And so on that front, you might sway me, but I don't think it necessarily has bearing on whether like porn itself is still like bad for you on an individual level. You're making an argument that on like a meta-social level, like it might have benefits, and I'm like maybe open to that argument, like maybe, but I'm still convinced on a personal level. Like, so you were talking about lack of self-control, right? And in terms of sexuality, and without porn, people wouldn't be able to control their sexual urges and all that stuff. But like the thing is,
not necessarily lack of control as opposed to just different available outlets, right?
Sure. Well, yeah, exactly. But yes, I see what you mean.
Is it time to go back and watch the old Python movie, Eric the Viking?
I have no idea what you're talking about. Sorry.
Eric the Viking is widely available for free on streaming services these days. But yeah, it involves, among other things, a young Viking warrior who is part of the winning conquest team, taking a village in battle, and he ends up in the awkward situation of being expected to rape one of the captured women after battle. He's totally unprepared for doing his proper.
Does he refuse? You gotta tell me what happens now.
Go watch the movie.
Oh, you're the worst person.
In any event, there are a lot of different ways that people are made up psychologically. the porn as an industry is very similar to religion as an industry in terms of it's relatively huge cash flow and potential for healthy or abusive use. But one other offshoot I was thinking of is that back in the days of Usenet news groups, there were some massive arguments among the regulars on alt-sex bondage, alt-sex bestiality, and alt-sex torture. Some of the BDSM crowd have this really strong cult dogma, that it's only okay to think about or discuss things that you could actually safely do with real partners. Under what ended up becoming a rejected ethical standard of SSC, or safe, sane, consensual, which tends to encourage judgments of people.
I'm sorry, did you say bestiality to be consensual?
Little about, but there are some people who have some fairly extreme torture fantasies, the same as playing certain video games now, that for them can be healthy outlets for certain energies or life balances, and that depend on a lot of other complicated stuff that's gone on in their lives. There are other people who find that so over the top and intolerable, but think that it should be banned for everyone because doesn't seem healthy to them in their life stage. And,
you mean like playing Grand Theft Auto or something like that?
Or even the Japanese traditional game of Street Fighter. That seems like a pretty sick game. I don't know if anybody's ever run into that or studied it or is aware of it as part of the cultural evolution or international comparison of cultural values. But it's not that the fantasies in one or the other of those groups, their focuses, are necessarily unhealthy. For some people, they are. For some, they're healthy, as expressed and in life context. And it's really hard without massive privacy violations, or even with them, because a lot of this stuff is subconscious, to sort that out for different individuals. But it's always wrong to overgeneralize, because that necessarily ends up resulting in fraudulent garbage conclusions, usually based on inaccurate or inadequate info going in.
I'd like to do a bit of a yes and myself to a section.
Okay. Go ahead, because that's complicated enough that it's impossible to express a complete version.
Well, I will do, because you mentioned something about how somebody might want something banned because they had a negative experience with it, what they think that it's bad. Yeah, that's where I say we really need to put the brakes on how far we take certain discussions about what should and should not be. I'm gonna hit you all with a hot take. Morality is subjective, and so are a lot of things about humanity. As much as as I've explained in the past, as much as we want them to be objective, I get it, I understand it, I want it to, but unfortunately, it's just not. And when if the goal of a society like the society in America, which it all sounds great on paper, is to increase the well-being for yourself and others, I don't think anybody would agree on an individual level that no one with a rationally functioning working brain would agree that any one person's views should be the way things are for everybody else. That is arrogant, that is bigoted, and frankly, it's not productive, because we are individuals that live in a group. And if only one person's opinions are ever listened to, what's your name, sir? John, understand, I'm not saying that this is you, but I'm saying that this is a dangerous territory that you stand on when you say something like, I think porn is trash, therefore it should be banned. Because I know you didn't say that explicitly, but I heard those words come out of your mouth. So I'm not putting words in your mouth. We tread on very dangerous territory when we do that. That's how we get authoritarian. And if history's taught us anything, that doesn't end very well. This is why I'd say the best thing to do.
Okay, so Aaron. Oh, you're still talking. Oh, shoot.
There are I know, let me say this. I know there are studies that say that
You're breaking up. I can't hear you.
if you're gonna live in a free society, you gotta give people freedom to make bad choices.
Okay. So,
Otherwise, you're stepping into authoritarianism.
okay.
I don't think you want.
Okay. Here's my question, and this is not a straw man. I'm just curious. What about heroin? So would you say that should be legal as well for the same logic? And I'm not trying to say that they're exactly equivalent. I'm
Yes.
just wondering if the logic carries.
Legalize
Okay,
all
well, at
drugs.
least you're consistent.
Absolutely.
Okay, at least you're consistent.
Yes.
That's fair. I disagree, and this is more political, and it's just because that I think while these abstract principles of freedom are very, very, very important, and believe me, like, I'm almost as libertarian as it gets. This has been a development in my thinking pretty recently. The reason they're instituted is to create a better society. And even like if I allow, not me, I allow, but if like the culture or the legal system rather allows for heroin addiction to become widespread, all in the name of the abstract properties of freedom, well then you're kind of sacrificing the goal in order to uphold the means. It seems it's like you're upholding the rule while violating the spirit of the rule. So I think there's a little bit of play in the joints there. On porn, I'm more intended to agree with you, but as a general rule, I think that's where the play in the joints is. So if you want to talk about that a little more, we can, or we can hop back over to the more explicitly porn stuff, because I have some neurochemistry that we could talk about.
Well, heroin addiction is being misrepresented there in a way that's common in public policies, especially once the U.S. is extorted on the world. But as I was mentioning before, medically it has uses, and there are people who other medically approved and politically correct drugs don't work on, where heroin's effective as a painkiller. There are also other cultures, where heroin is not criminalized, destroy people's lives for the power and profit of corrupt political and religious institutions, where heroin is used by addicts in ways that aren't as destructive as they're made in the U.S. Not by the drug itself, but by the socioeconomic and political surroundings that have been attached to it.
Okay, but here's what I'd say would be...
I tend to think that there's a stronger case to regulate antibiotics than there is to regulate narcotics, other than against fraud. And methamphetamine, I see like zero beneficial uses for, but I don't think that there's a justification to make it criminal either, especially when it ends up running up the prices and abusing people's access to pseudoephedrine and other common sinus drugs, under a political model that involves a massive fraud if you trace back the development of political models regulating that. But antibiotics, on the other hand, there are actual public safety issues from overuse and the development of resistant strains. As long as you don't use it and then go get into a bar fight combined with alcohol, or go driving when you're not safe to drive, which can happen for other reasons unrelated to drugs too. Where's the problem with people having access to narcotics?
Well, the theoretical problem is basically once you are addicted, or, which might not happen for everybody, but happens to enough people, or once you're under the influence, your very own agency to act responsibly, like not driving or not doing what you said, is taken away. And that's the biggest fear for me, is that these types of substances, these type of addictions, like this libertarian argument assumes intelligent agency, and we're like, hey, you can do what you want. We might think it's dumb, but you are fully capable of making your own decisions. The second you get hooked on a substance, that's no longer true. So it really seems like a bit of a paradoxical thing. I have to step out for 5 minutes to make sure I still have this room. Jimmy, we haven't heard from you, so please respond, and I will be back in 5. But please keep the conversation going, guys.
That's another overbroad conclusion, by the way. It assumes that conditions that affect some people apply to everyone universally in ways that just aren't true.
I literally said that it's not for everybody, but it happens often enough to matter. I literally said that exactly. So Jimmy and then Jacob, please go. I'll be back in 3 minutes.
Yeah, I don't know. I think you have to. I think you would have to make a case that that it matters. Yeah, it matters, but it doesn't matter more than the consequences of not having it. I mean, otherwise you just have a. Yeah, if you just look at one side of it, you just have a half an opinion, right? So what's the negative consequence of it getting banned?
Yeah, I'm the only drug I'm.
What are your thoughts on porn being bad for you and being an addiction?
Oh yeah, that's what the discussion is about, isn't it?
Yes.
So, yeah, I do believe it's extremely addictive. I do think it is, on the whole, it can be very bad. I think if you're going to use it, you should have control over it. And as soon as it takes control of you, that's where it becomes a problem, and you should step back. And I hope that you would realize what's going on at that point. No matter how you're using it, whether it's in your marriage or just yourself, because I've gotten to that point and I've had to step back and recognize what's going on with myself. So,
you know what one of the most effective ways of breaking addictive tendencies towards porn is I've ever seen?
What's that?
Some friends who were associated with a computer business that I used to be an owner of, were producing back in the era of getting your porn on CD-ROMs, porn CD-ROMs. They were doing it ethically and legally relative to industry standards. And among other things, bought 20,000 original 35 millimeter slides from Suze Randall, who's, the long-term professional photographer, mother of Holly Randall, whose podcasts I've linked a couple of in Pangburn. Give some guys who think they can't get too much porn 20,000 original professional porn slides shot by a high-quality photographer, and tell them, okay, we need to sort these out into categories, pull off the junk, and then clean up and process the images after scanning the ones that are worth using and sort out how they're worth using. The people who think they can never get too much find that porn ends up being a tedious job to deal with at that level, that they can in fact get too much, and that some of the cultural attitudes they were indoctrinated with really don't hold up very well when you're given that kind of access to look at it a little more closely.
Yeah, well, that's probably dealing with, not dealing with the reward system though that John was talking about, I think. But I understand your point. Yeah, you would get pretty tired of looking at it after the 20,000 slides.
It's a harsh reality check relative to what they thought they were going to be doing and experiencing.
Yeah, but all giddy at first, and then after 2,000 or 3,000 slides, it's pretty boring and laborious.
That's such a great job.
But then we did well enough on some of those projects that ended up getting people arrested for doing black market knockoff piracy.
What was that, Aaron?
Jimmy, would you agree that the very notion of wanting to outright ban, I'll say, let's go to the extreme, because I think it's perfectly reasonable to maybe want to try and socially start discouraging it, although I think that that's a practice that needs to be shut down immediately as well. But would you agree that telling people, hey, you shouldn't watch porn if they watch porn, would you agree that that's kind of meddling in people's personal lives in ways that's maybe just a bit too intrusive?
Yeah, I would never say that. I would just want to raise awareness in people that it can be addictive and that you can you can be addicted and not realize it.
And I think we should be encouraging more people to watch it.
Wait, what?
I think...
I'll blame the anarchist.
That's a.
Well,
that's,
I mean,
that's
it's
awesome.
impossible. It's impossible to avoid watching it. So you
That's
should
not
be.
true. That's not true.
Yeah, that's not true.
I would like to hear.
Well, how are you not going to watch it?
Just don't type in porn in Google.
Well, if you're a young person, how are you going to not watch it?
It's very simple. You don't go on Pornhub, and then
If you're 13 years old and you have a tablet,
Don't you
how are
think
gonna
it's
not watch it?
don't you think it's important for your parents to take responsibility for that kind of thing?
Absolutely.
I mean, like you're
They're supposed to be
passing
the ones
the
that guide
buck onto an industry for the failures of your parents to protect you when you were a child.
Sure.
They do that with a lot of things. Video games.
I'm not passing the buck. I'm
Yeah,
trying
no,
to
not
get
you,
to
but
the point.
not you
I'm trying to
personally,
get
but
I'm trying to get to the point where I'm saying it's up to the parents to educate their children. So as a 13 or 14-year-old has a tablet,
That
they are
doesn't
going-
work because there are a lot of sick parents out there with nasty attitudes towards sexuality in general who do something closer to child abuse than educating their children.
All right.
There-
Well,
there's a-
I would like to finish my point.
Okay.
I don't want you to finish your points.
If you have if a 13 or 14-year-old has a tablet, they're going to be able to access this stuff. So as a parent, it's important that we inform our children about this stuff. So eventually they're going to watch it, whether we tell them that they can or cannot. They're going to see it. So it's about raising them correctly and then educating them about that. So that way, when they are teenagers, they don't become hooked. And that way, as they mature, as they get older, they have the right context of what it is and how they can use it in their relationships and everything like that, just like you all have been talking about. That was the point that I was trying to make. So, yeah, I'm done.
So how do you do that in a way that gives them a healthy context, though, for sexuality in general, whether it involves porn or humans or
Well, it can be used. It's just that you don't want porn to use you. That's when it becomes an addiction.
Well, yes, it's
one
very,
attitude
very
I
addictive.
developed is that most porn I have come to view as sort of like a theater of the absurd, because it's sort of silly if you look at it that way, and the way a lot of it's produced. There's relatively little that isn't, and that may reflect on our society because porn, like broadcast news, has evolved away from traditional professional journalism standards into a neurology triggering trickery to boost advertising revenues to corporate investors. That's far more dangerous to society than anything I've ever seen with porn. But how do you raise people to have functional attitudes given how warped our society is in so many ways?
What did you say, cool head guy?
Yeah, you should get in here, Matt.
Oh, me? During Jimmy's bit about how you stopped about a 13-year-old from watching porn, I was trying to chime in saying that there are certain apps that you can download that have special pins that you need to unlock them that will actually block you from accessing those types of sites, and then you can pass in custom URLs if there's a site that doesn't match the app. And then there are also apps like that for laptops as well.
Oh,
so
that's
you could
just,
actually
oh.
install one of those.
Cool hack guy, don't you know? That's
One of
just
your-
authoritarian religious dogma being forced onto children. That shouldn't happen.
I think that it has the point to get to that point, has the ability to get to that point, whereas one extreme is, okay, you can't so much as touch your genitals or else you're going to go to hell, and then you tell them that, and then they feel ashamed about all their sexual urges. But I don't think that the other end of the extreme is perfect either, where you just say, okay, here's the whole entire universe of porn. Why don't you we're just going to throw you in there, and we're going to tell you that you can or that there isn't anything that's off limits or anything like that, and then you can just cruise to your heart's content as long as you want, and then
yeah,
we
and
won't
saying
watch you
nothing
because
seems. Yeah, I'm sorry. I keep thinking you're done, and then you're not. I'm sorry. But saying nothing seems to be kind of the equivalent situation, because it's still like zero boundaries because they never even address the issue. So I think a lack of familial structure is definitely a contributing factor. I would 100% agree. A lot of people have made that point. I think that's absolutely true. I guess.
So which is better or worse, a lack of familial structure or avoidance of difficult issues for a lot of parents, or an abusive one tied to obsessive compulsive religion with a hostile attitude towards sexuality as being a major healthy and normal part of life?
Well, our two ideas of what that thing that you just described is are probably different, but yeah, I'm going to describe what I mean and then I'll answer the question because I want to be specific. So yeah, if you have a parent who is a quote-unquote Bible thumper who is abusive to their child physically and also mentally, and threatens him with internal damnation every single time he does something that can be theoretically construed to be a sin, instead of teaching like what actual religious doctrine teaches, which is about forgiveness and forgiveness when one repents and stuff like that. If it's that or a lack of family structure, I would say the physically abusive parent is the worst category between those two things. So I guess I'd agree, but I don't think that all traditional religious morality is equivalent to that situation. And I think, and I'm not sure if you're doing this, but I know a lot of people try to roll all like religious style parenting into the same camp, and I don't think that that's honest or true or fair. And I'm not saying you're doing this, but I've seen a lot of people do it. This is a new human.
I actually agree with you on that point.
Yeah. This is a new human. Oh, also Dalsu. Dang, they're popping off. Okay, Pax, Pray, however you say your name, with like the devil avatar. What do you think about porn? And then we'll go to Dalsu because he seems to be back.
I prefer reading hentai, to be honest.
Okay.
I also enjoy reading material, though not hentai. I tend to think that basically it's, if we are going to go about getting rid of porn entirely, I think implementing something like Kant's categorical imperative might come in handy. And we can look at other forms of media and see if they perhaps are addictive or provide unrealistic expectations of reality that can lead to problems in life. And I think that pretty much all of them do.
Not in this. Okay, so this is really interesting. So this is an argument I hear a lot, and while things like gambling or Marvel movies or fucking Twilight with its unrealistic beauty standards, like whatever the fuck, you're alluding to, they all can have detrimental effects 100%, but pornography is specifically different in terms of the addiction element, because it has the natural reward behind it. Because at the end of the magical little path, you get your highest biological reward, and that enforces things.
I'm positing. Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
I'm just hinting at that. I think all media, to a certain extent, is addictive, and there are people all over the place who get addicted to daytime television or this one thing, to the point where like people have been killed before because like what's that movie? Yeah. Stephen King movie. It. Basically about that.
Oh. Yeah. I think I remember what you're talking about. And yeah, exactly. Like it can be abused, but my point is that while you can get really into shows to a obsessive extent in certain cases of disorders, one, that's exceedingly rare, and two, that's not happening because every time they finish an episode they like orgasm. Like there's no natural reward behind it. It's not the same thing.
When there's plot climaxes, there is a dopamine reward system that you get excited because those two characters finally kissed. Or whatever.
Yes, and it's the same way with gambling. Like you get a little bit of a dopamine hit every time you gamble and you win. Like, that's true, but that's not the same thing as a natural reward. Like me being happy when I see a like on Instagram can get addicting, but it's not the same thing as, or it's not nearly the strength as when I, am starving and I take a bite of a cheeseburger, or, I theoretically, if I went and I watched porn and I finished, like, that kind of, like, the natural reward behind it is much, much stronger. And I'm pretty sure the mechanics are a little bit different, but while you can associate certain things like winning money, which is gambling, or like likes on Instagram, which is basically social status, well, you can associate those things with natural rewards like sex and food, which is really what's happening when you win money. You're just associating that with other good shit that you like. It's not nearly the same strength as when you actually get the good shit that you like, which is food and sex. And so when that happens, you get the big dopamine rush, and delta phos B is released, which rewires your brain to be more sensitive to that specific source of dopamine. And then the opioids come out, because when you get natural rewards, you get opioids to make you actually like feel the pleasure. And CREB is released next to opioids, which makes you desensitized. And that's why Bruce was talking about how the dopamine hits are really big. And the reason for that is because once the CREB comes in and desensitizes your opioid receptors, your dopamine comes in even harder to compensate, which makes you get desensitized more, while your brain wiring gets even more strong, and it keeps going, and that's how you get addicted to natural rewards. And that's literally how it works. Like, it's literally addictive. And while you can get when you can get addicted to gambling, it's not the same thing. Like, just fundamentally.
It sounds like the reason you're saying that it's not the same is because it's unnatural somehow. That's what I'm getting, and I'm confused as to how masturbation is unnatural.
Well, no, not the masturbation specifically. It's the pornography part of it, because
pornography.
Again,
sorry, not masturbation.
Wait, so you don't orgasm at the end of every masturbation
Okay,
session?
so yeah, this is where the novelty part comes in. So I guess I'm just gonna make the whole pitch. So you can't get it. Go ahead.
How about if we introduce the people at Scotland Yard who sit in a room all day watching porn to decide if it meets certain politically and religiously correct versus prescribed standards?
Loki,
or the same people
Loki, I'm not talking about
who work
legality.
this Facebook contract.
Loki, I'm not talking about legality. I'm talking just about the basic neurochemistry.
No, but there are people whose jobs it is to watch porn, which other people for political and religious reasons claim should be prescribed, and they fall within the what I would call an overbroad universal that you're making as a basis for that claim. And I tend to think that they don't fit that model, and they offer a contrary example that proves that in some cases what you're claiming is just not true.
Well, are you assuming that Scotland Yard jerks off to every pornographic video that they have to filter through? Is that the assumption? Because if not, then the natural reward isn't there.
From the information I have on how they operate, they review a lot of stuff that many of the people find disgusting or traumatic to watch so much of as their job. And the same thing is true where Facebook has been pressured to reduce the work intensity and offer some mental health counseling to people on some of their content review teams. But they're not doing it for sexual gratification, and they probably have an aversion reaction as opposed to the natural reward mechanism that you're claiming is somehow universal from watching porn. Where it simply is not, and those are probably some of the extreme cases, of the opposite side
Loki,
of
the natural reward you get when you have an orgasm is in fact universal. I mean, unless you have something seriously wrong with you. And the reason porn matters is because it piggybacks on this natural reward and then hitches it up to endless novelty. You can't get addicted to drinking water even though it gives you a natural reward, because water always tastes the same. It's not true. And up until pretty recently, it was hard to get addicted to real sex.
Water. Wait. You got another. I think you might want to use a different analogy there, because water always tastes the same. Just flies in the face of the reality that I'm experiencing right now.
Okay, well,
I've tasted at least 4 different kinds of water just in the last hour.
You might like it more because you're thirsty, but in terms of like actual taste, I'm talking about novelty, like you can't.
Yeah, so
water's always the
I like
same,
just
while
in the
porn can
last
be
hour, I've had ordinary water, ginger ale, whiskey, and orange soda.
Notice how
whiskey and
you
orange
notice
soda.
how you listed a whole bunch of things that weren't exactly the word water, and we should. I think.
I'd
like you're
be honest,
dodging.
I didn't get the water analogy either.
Well, basically, what I'm
Sounds like
saying.
you're dodging.
I'm dodging.
Yeah.
Okay, how am I dodging? Because I don't want to dodge. So tell me what I should
you have
be
a
saying.
false premise. I just proved to you that your premise is false. That no, we actually do seek out novelty in everything we do,
Yes.
including just drinking water.
Sure.
People don't want to just drink water. They want 15 fucking different flavors of water.
Sure.
I
Yeah,
have
yeah.
72 different flavors of water in my refrigerator, in my garage.
Yeah, but you don't get addicted to water. Is my point. Because water.
Really? Have you
is
ever
the
tried to
same.
go a month without drinking water?
Okay, well that's not because of an addiction. It's because of
You
that's
can't. You
not
can't
the
even
same
go
thing.
2 fucking days without it completely overtaking your physiological.
Doolittle, we both know that the human dependence on water is not because of a psychological or neurological addiction. We both know that. So
Have you ever tried? Have you ever tried to go without drinking water? No, you haven't.
No, because
you
my
do
body
not
depends
know
on it to
how,
survive.
You do not know how much you psychologically need to drink water.
Yes,
you've never
because it
tried
keeps
to
me
not do
alive.
it. You're so fucking addicted to drinking water, dude.
Well, actually, my father used to be on a medical panel that wrote legal definitions for various terms when he was younger. I've discussed water with him, and water meets most of the provisions for an addictive drug, except that there are semantics applied in the categorization in medicine and law that exclude substances that are essential for life, that have all the other traits of addictive drugs, but that are essential substances like water.
Sex doesn't count as
Okay, so that is actually.
sex doesn't count as essential to life.
Well, I mean, it's
but the
essential to
semantic-
your
there's a
survival now.
it would be an addictive drug, except that the definitional semantics of the industries that classify those things exclude it. So it's a misuse of terms to call it addictive, even though it has all of the traits of substances that are addictive.
Okay, well, if we're getting to the point. Okay, so if we're getting to the point that water is addictive, then we should all probably agree that pornography is addictive, right?
Well, by
And
definition, water is
disagreement-
not addictive, but it has all the traits of substances that would be otherwise, other than by the semantics of the professional definitions.
Right. I mean, that's basically my same argument with pornography. Like most don't they categorize it as a behavioral addiction, but like again, when you look at the neurochemistry or like the brain activity, like it looks exactly the same. Like you can call it different things, but natural reward, dopamine surge, desensitization, and then cope-harder, more dopamine to make up for it, and then you just spiral. Like that's how it works. So you don't have to call it an addiction, but like the neurochemistry is exactly the same, which is my real point, and I think that's really dangerous. Yeah.
So, if there's one thing I cannot stand, if I had $1 for every time I said that, I could put you all through college. One thing I can't stand, specifically about entertainment in general, is how so many people point at the medium for the people who follow it. Right? I remember watching
You're breaking up. I can't hear you, man. I'm sorry.
Where some concerned parent was like, my daughter listens to music and now she doesn't believe in God anymore. So that's my fault. I can't control who lets me do that. So the discussion we're having here, porn bad because it's addictive. How is that porn's fault? Like the porn industry exists because there's a market for it. If there was a market for it, there'd be no porn. Cigarettes exist because there's a market for it.
Yeah, but they're both bad for you, which is the
and I see this every time. Well, but again, the thing that you'll notice is that when it comes to cigarettes, there's a warning saying, hey, this can cause cancer. Maybe the solution is to do something very similar with porn and say, hey, you could get addicted to this.
We'll see, Aaron.
Because at the end of the day, it's not the medium's fault that certain people who may not be as capable of controlling themselves get into it. So maybe we should stop blaming the medium for the problems of the individuals who flock to it. It's not the medium's fault.
I don't think you have
in some cases, it is the fault. Is if you look at what Tristram Harris has championed about Facebook, they actively work to be an addictive, dog cycling abuser. If you look at the so-called news media, before it became profitable and took over hours and hours a day on most television stations, it was treated by professional standards. It changed gradually as it became a profit center to be a consultant-driven content designed to trigger optimized responses in viewers for these stock earnings of holding companies and lost the professional standards it used to be self-governed by. There are a lot of things that are intended to be abusive for profit in our society, that may serve less of an individual function, for people to use them safely than Born does.
I never said that there aren't, obviously, but I'm going to go ahead and say this. If you could somehow prove that porn, and I'm not saying one way or the other, I don't know. If you could somehow definitively prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the porn industry exists specifically to leech off of people who may be like me, who feel like they may never actually have sex but want to know what it's like, or people who do have mental issues that hinder their judgment. If you can prove that the porn industry, beyond a reasonable doubt, is meant to capitalize on these things, I'm willing to meet you 100% and say we should absolutely have a discussion about whether or not it should be banned. But I don't think you're going to find that very easy to do, because I don't think that's the purpose of porn or the porn industry.
Well, Aaron, I'm glad we agree. I think we can meet in the middle on. I would also a warning label would be just great. So I would maybe we could team up.
Should you have a warning label requires a big sign outside every church?
Well, okay, no. Obviously.
Why not?
Yes.
Yes. All right.
What?
Got to be consistent.
I just missed something. Hold on.
Are we getting Travis chiming in here?
Just in front of the Catholic churches who are moving around pedophiles, I think that's probably a reasonable warning.
All right. Okay, if you really want to get consistent, we should put a big fucking one in front of every public school, because fucking child abuse happens in public schools way the fuck more than it happens in Catholic churches.
Yeah,
so we just need warning signs everywhere.
Your child might get boinked by a teacher if you go to school here. Definitely.
It's true. It's so true.
I mean, at that point, you might as well just put warning labels on everything.
Yeah, but okay, but
this is exactly what I'm getting at. Like,
so do you think warning labels should be taken off cigarettes?
When a baby is born, just
I think I bought a gallon of milk that said had a warning label saying it may contain dairy.
This is what I'm saying. Like, there should be a big fucking warning label when you're born, and that just says, "You will die somehow."
There's 100% chance of death.
No. Everything has the same warning label. Caution. Some people will like this. Some of you will like it a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That basically runs the gambit.
That's wonderful.
But just to be fair to John, because I know it can seem like we're being a bit antagonizing. Just to be fair, all I'm saying is, life has danger. We as a species absolutely want to minimize that danger. We absolutely want to minimize the amount of suffering that we have to go through, even if that suffering is in the form of something like an addiction, which I can understand, and I completely respect your desire to reduce because like any addiction is not something that I want for anybody. But at the end of the day, we live in a hostile environment. We live on a hostile planet. We live in a hostile universe. You can't protect everybody from everything. You can try your best, but at the end of the day, people are going to make their choices, whether you discourage them to or not. And you just have to accept that you can't save everybody. You can put the warnings in front of people's faces, and at that point, if they still choose to dive head first in that lava, knowing that's just going to burn them to pieces, sometimes you just got to accept that you can't save everyone.
Yeah, I think that's a.
Or
I
that
think
the
that's fair.
protective mechanisms can be abusive. As far as an industry goes, how about the transition of porn from being essentially a backroom operation in a lot of cases, producing physical media with physical actors, to the specialty houses in places that didn't technically make it illegal, like out in California and certain parts of the world, to a massive consortium like MindGeek, which seems to have some deviously hidden ownership, violate intellectual property rules between divisions of its own company, among others, and that is a rather shadowy business cartel internationally that in some ways seems to be a relatively professionally managed IT and financial empire, and in other ways seems like it's more of a corporate predator than even any particular industry, the same as like PGE or DOM, are securities speculators that own electric utilities. They're not traditional electric utilities.
Ownership, or like ownership of I'm sorry.
God damn it. Okay.
That's my one. I'm sorry.
Is MindGeek familiar to people here? Because there are documentaries on it, and there's a fair amount of information online, but it's a bit of a shadowy major global empire that's consolidated a lot of what were traditionally more splintered porn businesses.
Yeah, Pornhub is massive. It's really big. So yeah, 100%. Cool hat.
Pornhub is just one division of a massive owner. And a lot of the stuff that it does illegally in terms of intellectual property law, it does against other pieces of the same empire that actually have common ownership.
I did not know that. That's very interesting. Cool hat. Do you have any 2 cents on the porn Illuminati that Loki has just described?
I didn't quite understand it entirely. What do you mean, porn Illuminati?
Apparently, well, the pornography industry has become a lot less like back alley and very much more forefront in recent years. And also, even the big ones like Pornhub and apparently there's like a million other sites, they're all actually collectivized by some like owner that's actually behind.
About half of them are, which is a major consolidation for an industry that big.
Yeah. So that's,
I guess
I didn't even know that.
That's pretty much standard practice.
It didn't used to be standard practice until relatively recently in the history of the internet.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense because the internet sort of just like moves towards a winner-takes-all system over time as people like one website becomes a little bit more popular, so people upload it to more, and then that has more content, so it becomes even more popular until eventually it just consolidates everything. The same thing happened with like YouTube.
Same thing happens with the
like,
massive stars.
Yeah, it's the Pareto distribution. It's like winning causes more winning, and then it just keeps on winning until it's just one dominates everything.
Which is how a bankrupt California electric utility ends up running nude beaches in Vermont.
PG&E is the worst, dude. I used to live there, and yeah, I had to deal with PG&E. They suck. Like they're so bad. It makes me so sad. They started so many fires. Like
it used to be Pacific Gas and Electric. It's now officially PGE. The same way, FE or DOM, are stock speculators. They're not traditional utilities.
Yeah, the utilities are different, 100%. Are we categorizing pornography as a utility now?
I'm saying that there's a comparison to be made between MindGeek, and its prongs consolidating, different formerly competitive porn outlets plus adding some new ones and common infrastructure, and what the financial speculators have done to traditional electric utilities.
Well, Pornhub could be like a utility. It's just not granted a state. It's just not granted a monopoly by the state. It just happens to be big enough to have nearly a monopoly.
Yeah.
How the hell would they tax it? Look, here's the thing. I feel like all of and I cannot believe I'm the one saying this. That should tell you something. If you've known me for a while.
I got you.
I think all of this pointing at the negatives of the porn industry. Can we take a second to acknowledge the positives?
Yeah, I was actually quite confused as to why you all seem to be coming at it from the assumption that it's a bad thing. I think it's
exactly.
A good thing.
So it builds communities. There are people who get to explore the deepest parts of their sexual desires through porn in ways that they might not actually be able to do with another physical partner. Like, you might have a partner who doesn't want threesomes, but if you really want threesomes, you can watch videos of people having threesomes. There are groups, there are chats, there are all kinds of ways that people come. Porn is another way for human beings to come together, and you're telling people that they should stop doing that.
Okay, well, I can give you some reasons.
As far as I can tell, this Discord server is far more addictive than any form of pornography.
No.
You'd love to think that one, Travis.
All right, well,
but is it trying to be that by using the abusive trickery?
Wait a minute, are you trying to tell us that you orgasm at the end of each Discord session?
Philosophy is addictive.
Yeah. What was that, Loki? I couldn't hear what Loki was saying there.
But is this Discord server trying to do that through the abusive, manipulative, and deceptive practices, say, that Tristan Harris has tried to help bring to the forefront about Facebook and their operation, or is it trying to do it more honestly?
This is why I wear my man tanks at night on here, bringing in the ladies.
So true. Travis has the ulterior motives.
Psychological tactics. Where's Nivik? Nivik's all about the
Travis in a tank top is the natural reward.
And busy around home lately.
Pretty sure if Nivik was here, he'd be taking a middle ground, saying it's all about balance, not too far left, not too far right.
On one side, you're gonna come, and on the other side, no one comes at all. It's a balance.
He's not wrong.
Well, you see, the pendulum says it swings as a cause and effect relationship. There's too much on one side. There's too much porn, and you have too much. And you have too much porn, and then you don't get enough porn, and then that makes you want to have too much porn again.
Yeah, Nivik is just in favor of endless edging forever. It seems.
I noticed that Nivik gets very quiet when topics of sex start coming up. He gets real quiet.
Oh, Nivik gets so quiet. He won't talk about it. I'll be like, Nivik.
That's fine.
And I'm like, so Nivik, by the way, what do you got going on? He just mutes.
Silence.
So how does he evaluate the positivity and the negativity when we're talking about such complicated mixed models?
Look, all I'm saying is to get back to the point. All I'm saying.
Oh, sorry, Aaron.
Oh. Well, all I'm saying is, yes, there are people who will get addicted to porn, and yes, it will have an impact on the broader society. And again, I cannot believe I'm the one saying this. If just going to look at it from the negative light, you're not actually helping the conversation. And I'm sure Travis can see the irony. He's the one saying that. But there is an entire, I think that you said earlier that sex isn't as taboo as it used to be. I'm going to boldly claim that porn is part of the reason why. Because porn has become so easily accessible, we don't have to be afraid of our desires to satiate our curiosity about sex.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's a positive glass half full take by Aaron.
That's
and
incredible.
I love
it actually summarizes and consolidates some of the points I was making earlier. But
in way less characters, Loki. In way less characters.
I think everyone is still missing the main positive here, and that is just that porn is great and it's fun to watch.
Right.
It's awesome.
Well, as long as it feels good, it must be good for you.
John,
I'm hearing too much positive words in there.
I'll give my take.
Please.
Okay.
Oh no.
So I think if we're starting to split hairs on things like porn, let me ask you this, John. Do you think it would be way better for us to rid refined sugars, like from a demonstrable well-being perspective, to rid almost all refined sugars from our diet as opposed to ridding porn from our diet?
I don't know enough about the results of fine sugars to answer that question.
Right.
That's not me dodging. I actually don't know enough about
Yeah,
sugar.
yeah, and you
There's
know,
nothing inherently
It
harmful
was
about
the second
refined
leading
sugar.
cause of death before COVID came around in the U.S.
right.
That's very
And
true.
sugar-
that is very
sugars
true.
are bad. Sugars are very
Sugar's
bad,
bad, okay?
especially
First
in
we
the
were
United
starving, and now we're
States.
dying because we're too fat. It's just
So my
poetic,
thing is, John, of all of the things that might be dangerous for the human condition out there, there are some people that may like, I can't turn my porn screen off, help, and they can reach out for help. They should actually go talk to their doctor, their family doctor, because they'll lead them on a path to getting some help with that compulsion. But you know, as far as I can tell, it's very hard to find many actual confirmed cases of this going on. Like if you do a Google search, try to find the data of people who they could demonstrate that actually have like some kind of demonstrable addiction to this thing, where they like, they have physical detriments happening if they don't get their dose of it. I think that can happen with like Game of Thrones, right? And I know you were making a bit of a naturalistic argument about like how
Natural
like sex
rewards.
is more primal, but I wouldn't be so sure about that. You might want to look into the neurochemical processes a little more of like the sexual like reaction we get from getting addicted to like a Game of Thrones series. It's not necessarily going to end in climax in the same way, but there's a lot of interconnectivity going on there. But I see porn as very benign. I think it's great for people exploring, things that they might like, maximizing the well-being of their sexual potential. I think people who are having healthy sex and using their sex organs, it's a really good way to stay in shape and get that strong pleasure feedback and want to do more. And it wakes people up in the morning. It gets people going. It drives people. The drive for pussy is one of the strongest drives out there, I think, or vice versa.
The face that launched 1,000 ships, right?
Right, exactly. The face that launched 1,000 ships. You need go no further than that. And burnt the topless towers of Ilium.
Well, I guess to that last thing, I'd just make a quick note is, I agree. I think that human beings and man did greater things when it was harder to see boobs. I think you can actually like draw a corollary graph. But I think my thing is, if that's true, that's what drives people, but all of a sudden they can access it without having to do anything productive. They don't have to lift weights to attract a mate. They don't have to be productive. They don't have to get out of bed in the morning. All they have to do is fire up their laptop.
And also our imaginations, though, where we didn't have things, we imagined things, right? This has been and I heard some people talking about this earlier, but, drawing pictures of 7-titted goddesses on the cave wall, like this is something we've been doing forever, drawing dick pics and, they're all over caves, huge dick pics, enormous mountain-sized dicks. We've done this all through history. This god has the biggest dick. Look at it. It's the most powerful. We've been doing this stuff forever, and I think out of the key issues that are coming after humanity, I think depression is a bigger issue in the clinical psychology realm as opposed to this idea of porn addiction. I've been looking at porn my whole life. I would say if porn in anything in my own life has played a role of like turning me on to certain things, understanding better certain understanding the realm of possibility with regards to sex. And I think, that has improved my life greatly. And that's my own anecdotal experience. But I'm sure many would share that experience with me, just like how some people have positive experiences with things in life, like maybe something like avocado. Maybe their first avocado they ever ate was rotten, and if you've ever eaten a rotten avocado, it's not pleasant. And that turns people off of it. I think this porn experience is the same thing. Most people, I think, when they watch porn, they don't take it literally. Like, they watch porn and they say, "Oh, that's the kind of sex that's regular." Like, I think it's a bit of a, I think it's a bit of a straw man of the human condition, where they think that people watch that and they're like, "Oh yeah, my future girlfriend's going to be able to, be suffocated for 30 seconds every time we're engaging in some kind of oral sex." Like, it's like, I don't think, I think as people have their first few experiences, they're like, "Oh yeah, this is different," yeah. And I think, like, couples can use porn to enhance their sex life, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Couples can make their own porn, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that either. Sharing, there's always been this traditional stigma around where sharing your sex with other people around the world, a partner, as porn stars or whatever, is necessarily a bad thing, and I'm not too convinced of that. I think it just falls into the realm of pleasure hierarchies that are available to people, and so long as they're not harming the well-being of others in a demonstrable way, I think people should continue to do the things that they find pleasurable.
So
you know how hard it is to make decent porn of yourself? Because having been around broadcast engineering scenarios, I probably
really hard.
Tried that before there were cameras everywhere, and it's really easy to make embarrassing or pathetic porn of yourself.
Oh yeah.
Making good porn is really hard.
Scott Big Lebowski here used to have to crop out the buttholes in porn back in, I think it was the late 90s or something. He was doing that, but he would get handed these porn videos or porn images and have to crop out the buttholes in some of them. That was his job.
Let me tell you about a study that I was in that regarded porn. When I was in college at Carnegie Mellon, one of the psychology professors was doing a study, and they had people playing poker, like online poker, and they gave them a certain amount of money to play online poker, and you got to play poker, and you just, what kind of decisions do you make, and how risky are those decisions, and they took people that were actually like fairly good poker players that know what they're doing and they know the odds, and in the control group, they were just playing poker and making these decisions on these random games, and they tracked these people over like 20,000 games. So it wasn't a small amount of games that were played. And in the experimental group, the people that were being experimented on were shown like nude women and pornographic images while they were playing poker. And there was a remarkable amount of difference in the risk-taking behavior and the gambling behavior of the people that were otherwise good poker players who happened to be watching porn while they were playing poker.
Interesting.
So, to me, I think it's noteworthy, but I don't know if I don't know how repeatable the experiment is. But if you're watching porn while you're playing poker, you're more likely to, let's just say, make risky calls or risky raises or bluff more. And the psychologist attributed it to trying to differentiate yourself to get the sexual attention of the imaginary women that were on the screen.
Sure. Well, that makes sense given what... Oh, we have a couple new people in here, actually.
We got Zed and Shamir.
Yeah, so Zed... Well, actually, Shamir was here first. Shamir, you've been listening. What do you think about porn?
Well, I got nothing to say, actually. just
All right, fair
to
enough.
listen to you guys. Yeah.
All right, fair enough. If you want to chime in, just pipe up at any point. Zet, what about you, mate?
Yeah, man, I just joined. I don't know what we're
All right,
talking
well,
about,
I'm
so
sure
maybe
I'm sure I'll say
chime in
something.
later on, like in
All
10
right, fair enough,
minutes,
mate.
something.
Yeah, chime in whenever you're ready. So that kind of tracks because, again, so I'm happy to admit a conclusive study that's completely causal has not been done in regards to porn, but there's a large amount of corollary stuff, and we know the stuff on how the neurochemicals work on the addictive level, and I think that that's somewhat convincing. Like, so it tracks with basically the reason I bring this up is because Doolittle, you brought up that study. There's also a big correlation between porn consumption and delayed discounting, which basically means delayed discounting, and I'm sure some of you know this, but it's basically when you discount the value of a reward because it's farther away. It basically, if you delay discount, it means you have trouble with delaying gratification, essentially. And that kind of thing was linked to regular porn use pretty strongly. And I think that's
Yeah,
not
so
a
like
great thing for people.
in economics, it would be the time value of money.
Sure, yeah.
You would rather have money now than money later, and you wouldn't loan out money unless you had a higher interest rate, and you would be more likely to borrow money even if the interest rate was high.
Yeah, exactly. And people who watched porn repeatedly had that instinct to not delay gratification, like that was much stronger than everybody else, than the control group, rather, not everybody else.
It would be interesting to see a multi-axial study that compares porn to a wide range of other things that are pitched predictably in our culture. And like, for example, even the marketing of fashion and cosmetics can be linked to suicides, particularly of teen and young adult females. But, it's really difficult when you have complicated sets of issues that are context relational and that involve a lot of subconscious responses to do an effective study, and particularly comparative one. But going the next step, as far as taking that to public policy, so some people use porn in healthy ways, some people use it in unhealthy ways, probably both and other. But as a legal and a policy issue, it would seem that it deserves treatment under a strict scrutiny test, which presumes it has to be highly legally protected for being a form of highly protected speech, and it involves religious and cultural values to a huge extent, unless it can be proven to meet the conditions for regulation under a strict scrutiny evaluation. And nothing that I've ever seen about porn justifies that. But even, let's take an extreme case, how many know what the movie Hungry Bitches is?
Nope.
How about Two Girls, One Cup?
Oh, yeah. That's garbage.
I've seen that one.
Two Girls, One Cup is the official trailer from the Brazilian scat porn movie, whose actual title is Hungry Bitches. And it's probably the most disgusting porn movie that I've sort of watched, if you count scrolling through it rapidly, or most of it, and not sitting down and watching it. But I got a copy for free from an Amsterdam server because John Ashcroft was going after an obscenity prosecution of the Florida U.S. Commercial specialty importer distributing it, which he managed to obtain. Now, I don't see any valid reason to treat that as illegal in the U.S. That kind of use of obscenity law reflects the Supreme Court engaging in frauds and biased manipulation of the legal system for religious and political reasons that are properly fundamentally illegal under their own standards. At the same time, I'd have some questions about how involved I'd want to get in with anybody who thought that watching movies like that regularly was a particularly healthy thing to do with their lives.
Yeah. I mean, the weird thing is that if like you tried to make any of the, I know that the founders, that's not how you're supposed to interpret constitutional law, but it's very funny that the founders would be horrified that the Constitution is being used to justify this sort of thing, which is kind of a historical irony. My time's kind of up, so I think we're gonna move this over into the tavern. It was really nice hearing from all you guys. I still think there's a very large body of corollary evidence that I find convincing given the underlying neurochemistry, but I'm happy to concede no definitive causal study exists, but I do think the evidence is convincing, to me at least.
There's a difference between healthy management of one's own life and legal justification to censor other people's choices.
Yeah, I'm not arguing for it to be banned. I don't think I've ever seriously made that argument. For the exact reason that you just said. It was a good time, guys. You guys should 100% continue this over in the tavern, but my time is up. So thank you guys all for coming. I'll see you again next week with something else, hopefully just as stimulating. Damn it, one more pun.
Thanks,
stimulating.
man. That was awesome, John. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, I'm happy to. I'm glad I got to end on one more pun. God damn it, Bruce. Where were you like 30 minutes ago where I needed you?
Sorry, I was
It's all right. It's all right. Don't worry about it. Yeah. It's so annoying because it's so hard to do an actual causal study because porn is so like omnipresent. So like trying to find a control group is like really, really difficult for like people who have never been exposed to porn. Or anything equivalent. So the causal, the bedrock, ironclad causal studies don't exist. All we have is we know how the addictive neurochemistry works, and we could use that to predict a lot of the effects that are heavily associated and correlated with pornography. But just being able to, it's like having established science and being able to use that to predict some other corollary studies, but it's not strictly causational. So it's still not an ironclad argument I can bat people over the head with. It's kind of something I have to cajole, which is irritating, but that's how it is.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yeah. I don't know. Some of the stats are just crazy. Like 1,000% ED in 20 years, and like ED's been going up for a while, but that's a pretty massive spike that correlates pretty closely. Lack of ability to delay gratification. I wonder where that possibly could have come from when it's associated with pornography use. 2.5.
How about funding studies of ED? If you look at the research and the medical approvals, for a drug like Viagra or Cialis, there's an incredibly, convoluted clusterfuck of corporate drug marketing and off-label use issues, and trying to create minor variants to extend patents in ways that are very devious, and where, actually a doctor friend asked me to try to figure out why some of the things going on in her own industry were there, and ended up looking at patents and medical research.
Did that start specifically 20 years ago, or like somewhere around that? I'm just curious. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm sure. I honestly would believe it. But
the marketing of information to promote highly profitable drug sectors has been new relatively recently.
Here's my question though.
I would strongly suspect that has to do with money to fabricate marginally manipulated studies, with a lot of items to suspect about how and why they were done, that it may have to do with the actual published results that are out there.
Maybe. The thing with and I could have just gotten what you said wrong because you were kind of muddled, but like Viagra isn't marketed to like everybody because most people don't have that issue, or at least they didn't then. I don't think that explains 1,000%.
Viagra was never developed as an ED drug. It was developed as a generic hypertension treatment, and then mostly became marketed for an off-label cross-purpose use.
that became incredibly profitable and subject to a lot of predatory behavior by the drug industry when they figured out they could do that.
Well, you're going to put me in Alex Jones mode. I'm time for my tinfoil hat to go on even tighter. Thanks, Loki.
It's an incredibly convoluted subject to research, but there is a fair amount of info out there if you look. But it's obvious that there's a lot going on in this devious boardroom, corporate marketing intent that's, designed to manipulate and abuse people. You talk about porn being used in abusable ways, but the marketing of ED drugs looks like it's done in ways that, if you could prove what was probably going on in drug company boardrooms, would result in criminal convictions. But it's nearly impossible to prove what nearly certainly was done intentionally.
Yeah, no, I'm sure.
But they weren't ever ED drugs. They were drugs.
100%.
There were never ED drugs developed. There were drugs developed for other, even more common purposes that turned out to be more profitable off-label for sex.
Yeah, I believe that.
That part is well documented.
Yeah, no, I'm sure. Big Pharma does not have the best track record.
Well, not an awful lot of people look in FDA filings and Orange Book records.
Until the vaccine, that is. Okay, I actually do have to go, and yeah, okay. The person is literally at the door.
Anyway, we actually had a couple things we agree on tonight.
Yeah, and that was nice. I'm glad. I'm glad our conversations got more productive. I still think that the addictive neurochemistry, just plus the body of corollary evidence, it convinces me. I'm still in my camp, but the cultural thing was interesting, so I'm going to think about that a little bit more. I actually have to go.
It's a lot more complicated, and what you're representing as a universal is only a small part of a big, complicated picture.
Okay, well, be that as it may, that's too much to talk about right now. So thanks, guys. Later.
Anyway, thanks for.